Pip, it's delightful for me to be back here at your beautiful home in Montrose, and it brings back for me memories of turning up in 2018. At that time, it was the 35th anniversary of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, but you hadn't had any real connection with the society at that point for some years, and it took me quite a bit of digging to track you down here to Montrose and to find out how you were doing and whether you would be happy to even sit and talk to me about the society. If I can say so, the reputation that preceded you made you sound a bit scary, and I wasn't sure what to expect, but you invited us up here to chat, and I remember sitting for a good couple of hours hearing your stories about the foundation of the society. And since then, you've been welcomed back into the fold very much, and from my point of view, it's been a great pleasure. How has it been for you to re-engage with the society from that point where you didn't really have any connection at all with the club that you started?
Well, it wasn't very clear what was wanted. You know, they said, come back into the club and, you know, associate with us. And by implication, they said we're a very different lot of people from the people who were running things when you left, because let's face it, my leaving wasn't entirely voluntary.
That was in the 90s.
There's a long, unfortunate story, but I had made a lot of enemies. You don't build something like that without making a lot of enemies, and my enemies took the opportunity of getting rid of me. I had the opportunity of staying on in some purely ceremonial capacity, but I told them to get lost. It wasn't the kind of thing I was much given to doing. So by the time you came along, all that was left in the society was legends of this kind of wild man, which probably explains your apprehension. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I was never a wild man at all. But a decision had been taken to ask me if I would come back. And I think the decision had been taken because people were perceiving it as a slightly dull organization, and it needed a bit of the pizzazz, which it undoubtedly had when my pals and I were running things. We may not have been most brilliant at running limited companies, but we were good at enthusing people for superlative whiskey, and we had a lot of fun, and it showed. So I think the idea was that I would somehow contribute to making the place more interesting and more fun, as it had been in times gone by. The Scotch Malt Whisky Society had always been about ideas as much as it was about whiskey. After all, we didn't make whiskey. We were buying it in from people who made it and matured it and so on, and it was about our understanding of the product. And it was also about a series of practices with regard to whiskey, which we had invented, and which everybody at the time we invented them thought were daft, but which by that time had become copied by practically the whole of the whiskey industry. So it wasn't at all clear what distinguished the Scotch Malt Whisky Society from the rest of the Scotch whisky industry. The one big thing that we had suggested way back in 2083 when we started was that 1983, sorry, when we started, was that we should treat whiskey as though it was, as indeed it was, or as indeed some of it was, really high class, high quality liquor, and that we should take it seriously and appreciate it for what it was, which meant effectively nosing. Sticking your snout in a glass and sniffing and thinking what it was what the flavours were that you discerned in it. This was thought to be completely daft. No respectable whiskey drinker would have thought of doing anything of the sort. That was the sort that rather camp sort of people who drank wine did, not what whiskey drinkers did. And this was the big idea. Maggie and I celebrated our 30th anniversary of meeting in the members' room at the Society. I said, why don't we have lunch on that day in the members' room? So we did. And we had a very nice lunch, and there was a scattering of people in the place. And after we'd had lunch, we were having a coffee, and I noticed there were two members who were doing something odd with lots and lots of glasses. So I said to Maggie, excuse me for a minute. So I went and chatted to these old guys. And then I chatted to a few more members. And eventually came back because I could see Maggie was getting restive. And she was nice enough not to point out that, you know, you take a lady out for an anniversary lunch, you shouldn't go around chatting to a lot of old members. So I made my peace. But I got around to thinking about it. And what I was thinking was, the average elderly member of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society is a lot brighter and by and large a lot happier than his or her contemporaries on the street. Now, this is partly explainable by the fact that when I meet them, they're mostly drinking, doing something they like doing. But it didn't seem to explain why they should seem so much mentally more alert and better disposed. And I thought about this for quite a long time, and I couldn't think of an explanation until at the end of May this year, I subscribe to New Scientist magazine, which is the best kind of popular science magazine. And it occasionally runs a piece bringing you up to date with recent discoveries in a particular field. And it had a piece bringing you up to date with developments in the science pertaining to scent. And that was a revelation to me, despite the fact that I had been interested in the science of scent for quite some time. And it now appears our perception of scent is dependent on the routing of the nerves from the olfactory epithelium, which is the bit in your nose which picks up floating odours. And the nerves from there are routed to a thing called the olfactory bulb at the base of the brain, which has direct links into memory and emotion and all sorts of things. And the routing of the nerves from there is quite different from the routing of the nerves from sight or touch or sound. Investigation of scent had been largely neglected for a very long time because it was thought to be, in evolutionary terms, a more primitive part of our kit. But in the last 10 or 15 years, there has been a huge amount of investigation in this, and there have been all sorts of interesting things come out. And one of the correlations which is being made is between the state of this olfactory bulb and a whole range of diseases. Researchers have found out that if you don't use it, like so much else in our bodies, it decays. And especially in older people, the olfactory bulb decays, and so do the surrounding areas of the brain. And this is correlated. They weren't saying anything more definite than that, but this is correlated with a raft of more than 100 neurological diseases. General cognitive decline that happens in age, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, motor neuron disease, whole lot of things like that. All of these diseases have in common is that they don't yield to traditional research methods, and that cures are as elusive now as ever they've been. The suggestion has been proposed that these diseases are related to this decay in our olfactory bulb, and can correlate with decline in our perception of sense. Now, I was fortunate enough in being able to make contact with one of the leaders in the field, a man called Michael Leon, who is a big shot neurobiologist and an emeritus professor in the University of California. And he has been most helpful. And he has done a lot of the original research, or he and his team. And they have produced the suggestion that the brain, like other parts of the body, improved with use. And that by training people to discern sense, particularly pleasurable sense, you can actually improve their ability. And with the improvement of their ability to discern sense goes improvement in a large range of otherwise intractable diseases. Now, this was music to my ears, because you don't have to be a great genius to make the leap from there to the old boys in the members' room at the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. And at least to frame the hypothesis is that one of the reasons why these old guys are so bright, so happy, so intelligent, is that for donkey's years, they've all been doing what Dr. Leon and his colleagues suggest. That's to say, they've been spending a lot of time sniffing and paying attention to sense and practicing and improving their olfactory apparatus. And this has brought with it all sorts of wonderful consequences. And what's even better is that they get all these benefits not by doing something disagreeable, but by doing something that they like doing.
I think it's fantastic, Pip, because you're approaching your 85th birthday, but you're still coming up with the ideas. You seem to have retained that enthusiasm for the world of whiskey. Well, maybe you can
put that down to the fact that I've been drinking really good whiskey for the
sniffing
last
the good stuff
40-odd years.
Drinking the good stuff as well. Yeah, an inspiration to us all.
What?
But even from that reconnecting with society, you've written your story in The Founder's Tale, and it seems to me that might not have happened if you hadn't reconnected, because you didn't have an interest in the society at that time.
Oh, sure. Yes. It gave an impetus to it, and since writing was something that I do from time to time anyway, it wasn't difficult, and also there were lots and lots of good stories. I was very fortunate in my friends. I had a lot of really good and really interesting friends, and I think part of the problem that book has is that the stories are all true. There is no word of exaggeration in any of them, and I think a lot of people have treated it as being improbable, a certain amount of skepticism, because a lot of the people I knew at the time were people who, for no very obvious reason, were very, very different from the run-of-the-mill folk you would meet in your everyday life. And I don't know why that was. I was just very fortunate in the folk I knew.
There's some cracking stories in there, but if they're all true, then it's a hell of a life to have lived, and plenty of adventures along the way.
Well, I think I said earlier that I've got to the age of 85, and I've got what's classed as terminal cancer, and I can't say I feel too bad about it.
You've packed a lot
in. If this had happened when I was 45, it would have been a tragedy. Happening at 85, when I have had the pleasure of being being married to Maggie for a good many years, and I'd be sorry to be leaving not just Maggie and my children, but the members of the society. But, you know, hey, you've got to go.
I was going to ask, because you have had the chance to meet many members since your re-engagement with the society, you know, both here in Scotland and on some overseas trips as well. So you've had a good opportunity to engage with those members. How has that been?
It's great. I'm just delighted by it. It's always a pleasure, and that perhaps brings me to something that we haven't mentioned at all. The world today is in a pretty dangerous place, I think. I don't think anyone would disagree with me. There are all sorts of awful things happening and all sorts of awful people making them happen. And here we have a society which is based on nothing except good comradeship and friendship and kindliness and the liking for doing something that we're told is slightly bad for us. And there are, 45,000 people around the world who all subscribe to this. And now I'm sure these people have all sorts of ideologies and beliefs which would in other circumstances lead them to disagree with each other. But they come together to an extraordinary degree, and that's very gratifying.
Yeah, I mean, how does it feel that from that little kernel of an idea that you had back in the late 1970s, I suppose it was, before the society became an official entity in 1983, that at this point in your life you can look back and say there are now more than 40,000, well over 40,000 members of this society here and around the world who share that passion, and that links back to that moment that you had.
Well, it's very pleasing. It's very gratifying. There's no question about it. I think it would be an exaggeration to take all the credit for it. I just happened by accident on something that appealed to people. And I suppose also I was bloody-minded enough to pursue the idea when everyone said, that's a crazy idea, that's never going to work. But it did. And I'm sure lots of people produce lots of similar ideas that don't work through no fault of their own. I mean, it would be easy to pat myself on the back too much. And so I put it this way: I'm more than content with the way things are.
Good. And any message that you would want to share to members at this point?
I'm not terribly good at giving people messages. You do what you do because you are inclined to do it, and you're fortunate if you hit on the good bits.
Yep.
Let's face it, if your preferred leisure activity consists of shooting at mannequins in a rifle range, is gratifying to you, I don't think it's particularly commendable, but it's understandable, you know. I think we're just lucky that we're on the good side.
Yeah. Keep nosing. Keep sniffing.
Mm-hmm. You're not going to do anybody any harm.
Correct. Pip, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for spending time with us. And happy birthday when it comes.
Okay, thanks a lot.